It was a bright Saturday morning. Families bustled through the gates of the amusement park, their laughter rising above the clatter of ticket booths and the scent of popcorn. But just outside the entrance, one man sat still on a bench, motionless, unnoticed. He didn't hold a protest sign. He wasn't shouting. He simply rested his hands gently on a faded military cap in his lap and looked straight ahead. Why was he just sitting there? What had kept him from going in like everyone else? People walked past him, again and again, barely glancing his way. Children tugged at their parents' hands, eager for rides. No one seemed to wonder who he was or why he hadn't moved. Not every hero asks to be seen. Some just hope to be remembered, quietly. If that means something to you, you're in the right place. Subscribe to American Quiet Courage. The bench was metal and chipped at the edges. It sat near the trash bin, a little too far from the shade. Yet he chose that exact spot. His back was straight, but not rigid like someone taught to sit with discipline, but now older, softer. His pants were neatly pressed, though well-worn. One sock didn't match the other. On his wrist, a plastic hospital band peeked out from beneath his sleeve. He wasn't there to complain. He wasn't there to make a scene. He just sat. Quietly. Waiting. For something, or maybe, for someone. The sun edged higher, casting long shadows across the concrete path where the bench sat. Frank Mallory hadn't moved. The faded cap still rested in his lap, both hands folded gently over it as if protecting something far older than fabric and thread. He watched the crowds funnel through the turnstiles. Kids bounced on their toes. Parents juggled bags and strollers. Someone dropped a soda cup near his feet. The ice melted slowly, but Frank didn't flinch. He blinked, slow and deliberate, like he was trying to take everything in, but from a distance. His gaze didn't chase anyone. He wasn't searching. Just present. As if his very being was an answer to a question no one had asked in years. A teenage worker passed by, sweeping up bits of popcorn. She glanced at Frank for half a second, then looked away, her earbuds tucked deep. A breeze stirred the edge of his pant leg. The cap remained still. It was an old Marine cap. Frayed at the brim. The emblem barely visible anymore. Not the kind you buy in a gift shop. This one had shape. Memory. Maybe even weight. A boy, maybe 6 or 7, tugged at his mom's hand and pointed. "Is he a soldier?" he asked. The mother didn't stop. "No, honey, that's just an old man." Frank didn't react. Not to the voice, not to the words. But one corner of his mouth twitched, just enough to know he'd heard. Still, he stayed seated. His shoes flat on the ground. His shoulders steady. The kind of stillness that only comes from years of knowing there's nothing left to prove, and maybe not much left to wait for either. The crowd moved on. The cap stayed in his lap. And no one noticed it but him. A young man in a park uniform stepped out from behind the ticket window. His name tag read Kyle. He couldn't have been more than 22. Still had the kind of skin that didn't know what sunburn really meant. He walked with hesitant steps, clipboard in hand, trying not to make a scene. "Sir," he said quietly, just loud enough to break the hush around the bench. Frank looked up, not startled, just attentive. His hands stayed on the cap. "I saw you've been waiting a while," Kyle continued. "But there's a new system now. You need to register for the disability pass online. At least 24 hours ahead." Frank nodded once. Just once. No protest. No confusion. Just that same quiet attention. Kyle shifted on his feet, glancing toward the gates. "I don't make the rules, sir. It's just, corporate said we can't process anything without pre-approval." Still, Frank said nothing. He didn't even reach for the card again. He'd shown it earlier, and the gesture hadn't been enough. Kyle offered a practice smile, the kind taught during orientation. "If you come back tomorrow, we can probably." But he stopped himself. Frank wasn't writing anything down. Wasn't asking for a solution. He just sat back again, eyes steady. The clipboard lowered. For a second, something flickered behind Kyle's expression. Maybe guilt. Maybe discomfort. But mostly, it was that look people get when they realize they're not talking to someone upset, but someone already resigned. "I'm sorry," Kyle said, softer now. "It's just the policy." Frank nodded again. Same stillness. Same posture. He wasn't asking to be let in. He just hadn't left. Across the street, a black SUV rolled to a smooth stop. Not fast. Not loud. Just intentional. The kind of arrival that doesn't draw attention but still changes the air somehow. The driver's door opened, and a woman stepped out. Mid-50s, pressed navy blazer, no sunglasses, no entourage. She paused on the sidewalk, took one long look toward the gate, then toward the bench. Her expression didn't move, but something in her eyes settled when they landed on Frank. She crossed the street without urgency, as if time belonged to her. The guards didn't stop her. The staff at the gate didn't ask questions. And Kyle, he had already retreated back inside. Frank didn't turn his head. But his shoulders, just barely, lifted then fell. He had noticed her. She stood a few feet away, not speaking. Not yet. Pulled out her phone, glanced at the screen. Then made a single call. One sentence, quiet, not rushed. Then she hung up. She walked closer, still not invading the space. Still not explaining. She just looked down at the man on the bench and said, softly, "You don't need to say a word." Frank looked up. Eyes clear, not surprised. He nodded. And they both stood there, he sitting, she standing. Neither trying to fix the moment. Neither asking for pity. No noise. No announcement. But minutes later, the music from the speakers above the gates cut out. Then the intercom came on. All park operations will pause temporarily due to an internal review. Please make your way to the exits in an orderly fashion. People murmured. Staff scrambled. But Frank remained exactly where he was. And the woman didn't leave his side. The gates closed quietly behind the last of the guests. No sirens. No shouting. Just the slow creak of metal and the soft hush of footsteps fading. Employees stood in clusters, unsure of what to do, whispering guesses they didn't dare say aloud. Frank stayed seated. The woman in the navy blazer remained beside him. She hadn't introduced herself, and Frank hadn't asked. But there was no misunderstanding between them. A man approached from the gate, clipboard, headset, stiff posture. He looked at the woman and opened his mouth, but she stopped him with a glance. "I'm not here to talk to you," she said gently. Then she turned back to Frank. "I heard about you. Didn't recognize your name right away. But I remember your face." Frank didn't answer. Not from rudeness, just the calm of a man who'd learned when silence said more than words ever could. The woman slowly sat beside him on the bench, leaving a respectful space between them. Not crowding, not performing. Just being there. "I don't do photo ops," she said. "I don't do ribbon cuttings. And I don't shake hands for cameras." She paused, resting her palms on her knees. "But I do believe in showing up. Especially when the people who should have noticed, didn't." Frank looked down at the cap in his lap. His thumb brushed the worn edge. "You didn't have to come," he said quietly. "I know," she replied. "But someone should have. So I did." There was no press. No applause. No headlines waiting to spin it into something bigger. Just two people sitting on a bench, one carrying memory, the other carrying responsibility. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small folded paper. No letterhead. Just a handwritten note. "This isn't policy," she said. "It's personal." Frank took it without opening it. He didn't need to read it right then. For the first time that morning, he shifted slightly, just enough to sit a little taller. The bench hadn't changed. The silence hadn't lifted. But something about it felt lighter. The next morning, the governor stood behind a simple podium at a small local station, no state seal, no grand backdrop. Just a folding chair, a cup of lukewarm coffee, and a dozen reporters who hadn't expected anything more than a routine update. She didn't bring notes. Her blazer was the same navy one from the day before, a little wrinkled at the shoulders. The kind of wrinkle that happens when someone wears something twice for the right reason. The anchor gave the usual handoff. "We're joined this morning by Governor Lane for a brief statement on yesterday's unexpected park closure." The camera framed her shoulders up. No fancy lighting. No teleprompter. She looked into the lens, calm and steady. And then she said it. "We built that park to create memories, but if a single memory is denied the dignity to enter, then it's not a park I'm proud to stand behind." That was all. One sentence. She stepped back from the podium. No questions. No applause. The camera lingered for a second too long, catching the way she exhaled, not dramatically, just enough to show the wait had been real. The station switched to weather. But in homes across the state, people paused mid-coffee. A few rewound the broadcast. A few more called their sons or daughters and said, "You need to see what she just said." Frank Mallory wasn't watching. He didn't own a television. But later that day, someone at the diner 2 blocks from the park brought him a copy of the local paper. Folded open. Laid gently beside his plate. He didn't pick it up. Just glanced at the headline. Then back to his coffee. The cap still sat beside him on the booth seat. He didn't need to hear the sentence. He had already lived it. 3 days later, a large white envelope arrived at the front desk of the shelter where Frank stayed most nights. No return address. Just his name written in careful, printed letters. It sat in the mail tray for hours before anyone thought to hand it to him. When they finally did, Frank didn't open it right away. He turned it over once. Then again. Studied the crease of the seal like he could read the intention behind the glue. Inside was a letter, typed, polite, and full of official phrases. Words like regret, unfortunate oversight, internal review. It came with a laminated VIP pass to the amusement park, valid for life. Unlimited entries. No expiration. He folded the letter once, then again, and placed it on the windowsill near his cot. The pass, he tucked behind his cap. Not into it. Just beneath, like it didn't quite belong. That night, he sat outside the shelter on a metal folding chair. The sky was soft with late summer haze. A bus rumbled past, empty. Somewhere down the block, a dog barked, twice, then fell quiet. A volunteer came by, her arms full of donation blankets. "You going to go back?" she asked gently. Frank looked at her, not annoyed, not amused. Just steady. "Not sure there's anything there for me now," he said. She nodded, not pressing. Some things, when delayed, don't return the same. An apology can be honest. A gesture can be generous. But time has its own rules. Frank glanced down at the cap resting in his lap. The pass peeked out beneath it like a forgotten receipt. He didn't throw it away. But he didn't pack for a visit either. A month passed. The weather cooled, just enough to change the way the morning air moved through town. At the edge of the amusement park's entrance, the old bench remained in its place, repainted, but unchanged in shape. And on its side, a small brass plaque had been installed. It didn't carry a title or a slogan. Just a name. Frank Mallory. He sat here. And we noticed. No ceremony. No ribbon cutting. No one gave a speech. One morning, a group of school kids passed by on a field trip. Their teacher paused briefly, nodded toward the bench, and said, "That's a reminder to pay attention to the quiet ones." Then they moved on. Frank wasn't there. He still came to the shelter some evenings. Still took his coffee plain. Still wore the same jacket, stitched once near the elbow. But he no longer passed by the park. Not in protest. Just because he didn't need to anymore. At the small Veterans Center downtown, his cap now sat in a glass case next to a folded American flag and a single dog tag with no chain. The laminated park pass was there too. Visitors walked by without noticing it at first. But the stillness of the display had a way of slowing people down. Outside, on a quiet afternoon, a boy tugged at his grandfather's sleeve. "Who was he?" the boy asked. The old man looked at the name, then the empty bench, then back at his grandson. "He was someone who didn't raise his voice," he said. But the world still heard him. In a world that often rewards noise, Frank Mallory reminded us of the quiet power of dignity. He didn't protest. He didn't demand attention. He simply sat, and in that stillness, made the world stop long enough to remember its values. From a closed gate to a bench with his name, Frank's presence proved that integrity doesn't need a spotlight to leave a mark. His story teaches us that sometimes, the strongest voices are the ones that never rise above a whisper but speak directly to the heart. How many people like Frank have we passed by without noticing? If this story moved you, if it reminded you of someone you love, or of a moment that stayed with you long after it passed, consider liking this video, sharing it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribing to American Quiet Courage. Because some stories shouldn't fade. They deserve to be remembered quietly, but forever.